The wind howled like a starving animal, dragging sleet through the pine trees that bordered the Boone homestead. It was late autumn in the Montana Territory, and nightfall came with teeth. Elias Boone stood outside his cabin, shoulders squared, splitting firewood with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. Each swing of his axe echoed into the hills like the ticking of a clock counting down to something unseen. He paused only when a strange sound broke through the storm, hooves, but unsteady, dragging. Elias turned, hand drifting to the rifle leaned beside the door. From the curtain of sleet emerged a mule, lathered in sweat, reins hanging loose. Behind it staggered a woman, barefoot, blood crusted along her hem. She clutched her swollen belly, eyes wide, glassy, and when she looked at him, it was like she'd seen a ghost. She collapsed before she reached the porch. Elias didn't move at first. He had known ghosts before, on battlefields, in empty cradles, and in the cold eyes of the dying. But this was flesh and blood, shaking from cold and fear. He cursed under his breath and knelt beside her. Her skin burned with fever, her lips cracked, and she clutched a worn leather pouch like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. "You lost?" he asked gruffly. Her eyelids fluttered. "Please," was all she said. Elias scooped her into his arms, surprisingly light, and carried her inside. The door groaned shut behind them. He laid her near the hearth, where the fire still smoldered. He wrapped her in wool blankets and poured a tin cup of boiled water. She sipped weakly, flinching when the fire cracked. "I'll fetch bandages," he muttered, more to himself than her. She didn't speak again for an hour. She just stared at the flames like she was somewhere else entirely. Elias watched her from the shadows. She wasn't from around here. Her accent was soft, Eastern maybe, and her hands, though scraped, had once known silk gloves. The bump beneath her threadbare dress was unmistakable. She was weeks, perhaps days, from birthing. He set a pot of beans on the stove. Outside, the storm picked up strength, rattling the shutters and whistling through the chinks in the logs. Wolves howled on the far ridge, distant yet disquieting. "You got a name?" he asked. She looked at him for the first time then, really looked. Her eyes were a pale gray blue, startling against the bruises blooming along her cheek. "Clara," she said finally. "Just Clara. No last name. No explanation." Elias grunted, turned back to the fire, and said nothing more. Later, as the wind screamed and the storm clawed at the roof, Clara stirred. She noticed the rocking chair near the hearth, empty, dusted with time. A faded baby quilt was draped over one arm, untouched. She reached for it, but Elias gently stopped her. "Was hers," he said. "Leave it be." Clara didn't ask whose. She just nodded and tucked the blanket tighter around herself. At dawn, the storm had eased, leaving behind a world scrubbed raw. Elias stepped outside to find a fallen pine sprawled across his fence, and cougar tracks in the snow, circling close. He tensed, scanning the woods, but found no sign of the predator. When he returned, Clara was sitting up, ladling beans into a bowl. "You should rest," he said. "I've rested long enough." Her voice was stronger now. She glanced at the rifle near the door. "You keep that loaded?" "Always." She nodded. "Smart." Elias narrowed his eyes. She wasn't what she seemed. There was steel under her softness, a readiness to bolt. He'd seen that look before, mostly in men hunted by other men. "You runnin' from someone?" he asked. Clara's lips pressed together. She looked away. "I don't mean to bring trouble to your doorstep," she said. "Trouble don't knock out here. It breaks in." She gave a short laugh, almost involuntary. Then silence again. Later that day, while they gathered water from the creek, Clara slipped on the frosted stones. Elias caught her, steadying her with one hand as she grimaced in pain. He noticed then a faint, fresh mark on her wrist, burnt into the skin, a brand. "What's that?" Clara yanked her arm back. "Nothing. Looks like ownership." Her mouth tightened, but she didn't answer. The pouch clutched under her shawl shifted as she moved, heavy with contents unknown. Back at the cabin, Elias chopped more wood while Clara swept the floor, though her strength wavered. They spoke little. At dusk, a rider appeared down the trail, a broad-shouldered man on a chestnut gelding, badge glinting on his vest. He dismounted slowly, eyeing the cabin like a wolf circling a den. Elias stepped forward. "Sheriff," he said. The man tipped his hat. "Boone. Got word a woman came through here last night. Pregnant, traveling alone. Might have stolen something that don't belong to her." Elias didn't answer. Inside, Clara froze. The sheriff stepped closer. "We ain't here to hurt her. Just need to talk. Her husband's dead. That gold she's carrying, there's questions need answering." Before Elias could speak, the door creaked open. Clara stepped out, one hand resting on her belly. "She's with me," Elias said carefully. The sheriff tilted his head. "That right?" Clara slipped her hand into Elias's. Her voice was steady, practiced. "He's my husband," she said. "Ain't no law been broken." The sheriff studied them both. Suspicion danced in his eyes, but he said nothing. Just nodded slowly. "Well, if that's the case, you'll come into Pine Hollow tomorrow. Talk things through." "Tomorrow," Elias agreed. The sheriff mounted, lingered a moment, then turned his horse and rode off into the dusk. As the hoofbeats faded, Clara let go of Elias's hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Elias stared at her, jaw tight. "I don't know what this is," he said, voice low. "But you'd better be straight with me by sunup." "I will," she said. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Morning light broke reluctantly through a veil of fog, casting the forest in muted silver. Elias stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, watching Clara load the mule with a quiet efficiency that spoke of hard lessons learned. She didn't look at him. She hadn't since the night before, when she'd lied so easily to the sheriff. He hadn't asked her why. "Not yet. You ride or walk?" he asked. "Ride," she said. "I'll keep up." They set off on the narrow trail toward Pine Hollow, silence stretching between them like the space between stars. Elias led, eyes scanning for movement. Clara followed close, one hand steadying the pouch tucked beneath her coat. She hadn't let go of it since arriving. By mid-morning, the trail narrowed and climbed. Snow still clung to the trees, melting in quiet drips. The air was damp and heavy, and somewhere in the woods a raven called out once, then fell silent. They passed a broken wagon half swallowed by underbrush, its wheels long rotted. Clara eyed it as they rode by. "How far's the town?" she asked finally. "Another half day if we don't get slowed." "Is it safe?" Elias glanced over his shoulder. "No place out here really is." That night, they camped beneath a granite outcrop beside a frozen stream. Elias built a fire, and Clara boiled strips of rabbit he'd trapped earlier. Her hands trembled, not from cold. "You lied quick, back there," he said, voice quiet. She didn't deny it. Just stared into the flames. "He would have taken me," she said at last. "Dragged me back. Doesn't matter what I've done. When a woman runs, folks don't ask why." "What did you do?" Clara hesitated, then untied the leather pouch. She placed it between them on the ground but didn't open it. "My husband," she began, "was a preacher. Or he claimed to be. Back east. Kansas. Kind to the congregation, cruel at home. I was 16 when we married. It was winter. I remember thinking the church bells sounded like freedom. I was wrong." Elias said nothing. His eyes didn't leave her face. "First it was bruises. Then he branded me, said I belonged to God, and he spoke for him. When his debts grew, he sold me to men who collect favors with guns. I escaped during a raid. Stole the deeds he planned to forge and the gold he was hiding. Ran west until my feet bled." She finally opened the pouch. Inside, folded deeds to a small estate, 2 golden wedding bands, and a child's locket with a charcoal sketch, faded but lovingly drawn. "Who's the boy?" Elias asked. "His name's Matthew. He's not mine. He's the son of a woman my husband destroyed. I promised her I'd keep him safe." She closed the pouch gently. "I lost him near Kansas City. Gunfire scattered us. I've been looking since." Elias leaned back, wind stirring the fire's edge. He looked older then, not in years, but in weight. As if time had pressed on him more than most. "My wife's name was Eliza," he said. "We were expecting when I went off to war. I came home to find 2 graves. Fever took them both. I built that cabin myself, but I left the cradle unfinished." Clara's hand inched toward his. She didn't take it. Just let it rest nearby. "There's no law for people like us," she whispered. "Only luck and hard ground." They rode into Pine Hollow the next morning. The town looked the way Elias remembered, hunched buildings of rough timber, a single main street where dust turned to mud when the snow thawed. The general store, the sheriff's office, a saloon with its windows broken on one side. Folks stared as they passed, some curious, others hostile. They rented a room above the saloon. Elias paid in coin. The innkeeper eyed Clara but said nothing. Inside, the room was spare, 1 bed, a cracked basin, and moth-eaten curtains, but it was warm. Clara dropped onto the edge of the bed and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "You still mean to go talk to the sheriff?" she asked. "I said I would. He won't believe we're married." Elias glanced toward the door. "Then we'll make him." A knock interrupted them. Elias's hand went to his rifle instinctively. But it wasn't the sheriff. A thin, leather-skinned man stood in the hall. Long black coat, snake-quick eyes. A bounty hunter. Elias recognized the type before a word was spoken. "Name's Jed Shaw," the man said, smiling like a wolf. "Heard you're sheltering a woman with a price on her head." Clara stepped behind Elias. You heard wrong, Elias replied flatly. Jed's smile didn't fade. Funny how much trouble one woman can cause. Preacher back east put out a reward for her safe return. Said she's carrying his child. Town'll get noisy when they learn. You should leave. I will, Jed said, tipping his hat. But I'll be watching. He vanished down the hall. That night, Clara barely slept. Elias sat in the wooden chair near the door, rifle across his lap. Outside, snow began to fall again. The quiet pressed in like weight. She rose after midnight and knelt beside him. I don't want to run anymore. You might not have a choice. She took the pouch and placed it in his hands. If I don't make it, bury this. With my name on it. He looked at her, then at the pouch, and slowly nodded. There's still time to leave, she said. To let me face what's coming. Elias's voice was low and certain. You called me husband in front of the law. That means something. A silence passed between them, not empty but full of something unspoken. Then she leaned her head against his knee, and together they waited for the sun. The dawn came slow, staining the sky in bruised pink and iron gray. Elias stirred before the first church bell rang, boots on, rifle checked, as if he'd never stopped fighting even after the war ended. Clara stood at the window, her breath fogging the glass. Down on the street, Jed Shaw leaned against a hitching post, hat low, revolver resting easy at his hip. The kind of man who didn't bluff. We could sneak out, Clara whispered. Elias shook his head. He'd follow. Or someone worse would. A knock came, this time sharp, official. Elias opened the door to find Sheriff Tillman waiting, hand on the butt of his Colt, eyes wary. Morning, the sheriff said. Got questions need answering, Boone. About that woman. About what's true and what ain't. Clara stepped forward. It's true. I lied. He's not my husband. The sheriff arched a brow, waiting. But he took me in. Fed me. Kept me alive. If there's a crime in that, then punish me. Not him. I'm not here for punishment, Tillman replied. I'm here for clarity. That bounty hunter downstairs says you stole gold and documents. That you're wanted in Kansas. I stole back what was already stolen, Clara said. From me and from others. Elias glanced at Tillman. You know Jed Shaw's kind. He ain't after justice. The sheriff studied them both a long moment, then nodded. You'll get your say. In the saloon. Public hearing. Noon. Until then, stay inside. When the sheriff left, Elias turned to Clara. Are you ready to tell it all? I've nothing left to hide, she said. Only something to lose. The saloon was packed by noon, ranchers, drifters, women in shawls and weathered men nursing tin cups of coffee. Jed Shaw leaned against the bar, smile coiled like a snake waiting to strike. The sheriff stood at the center table, badge gleaming. Clara Weaver, he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. You've been accused of theft and fraud. You have the floor. Clara stepped forward, shoulders back despite the tremble in her hands. I was married to a preacher named Malachi Weaver, she began. He ran a congregation in Kansas. Claimed to be God-fearing. In truth, he was a trafficker, of money, of lies, of women. When he realized I was carrying, he branded me. Said it was a sign of devotion. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I ran. I took back what he had, money earned through sin. The deeds were fakes. The gold? Bloodied. I don't want it. I want safety. A chance to raise this child somewhere clean. Jed Shaw stepped forward. Sounds rehearsed, he sneered. She's clever. Killed a man on her way west. That's a lie, Clara said. He tried to drag me back in chains. I broke his nose and fled. He died from his own horse. The sheriff raised a hand. And you, Boone? What's your part in this? Elias looked over the crowd. Faces watched him with suspicion and curiosity, but he didn't flinch. She came to my door, cold and near dead. I gave her a place to rest. That's all. I didn't ask for her story. But I heard enough to know what she is. And what's that? The sheriff asked. Elias looked at Clara. Someone trying to survive. Murmurs. A few nods. One man cursed under his breath. Jed's eyes darkened. This town's got laws, Shaw said. And I've got a writ for her arrest. He pulled a paper from his coat, but before he could hand it over, Elias stepped between them. She goes nowhere. Jed grinned. You gonna stop me, soldier boy? The room stilled. Elias's voice dropped. You take one step toward her, and I'll put you down. Time froze. A chair scraped. Someone whispered a prayer. Then, gunfire. It wasn't clear who shot first. Jed drew fast, but Elias was faster. The bullet caught Jed in the shoulder, spun him back into the bar. He fired once more wildly, shattering a bottle, then fell to the ground, bleeding. Clara crouched beside Elias, breathing hard. No one else moved. The sheriff stepped forward, eyes hard. I saw it, he said. Jed reached first. Clear self-defense. He turned to the onlookers. Anyone got a problem with that? Silence. Then, slowly, heads shook. The sheriff nodded. Then it's done. 2 days later, Clara and Elias sat on the porch of the Boone homestead. Snow still covered the trees, but the sun was stronger now, warming the earth inch by inch. You think he'll come back? She asked. Elias shook his head. No. And if anyone else does, they'll find me waiting. Clara ran her fingers over the locket, now resting on her belly. I need to find Matthew someday. I promised. You will. And if I can't? Elias looked out across the mountains. Then you make a life anyway. You honor the lost by living. She smiled faintly. That what you're doing? I think I'm finally starting to. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Neither spoke. The wind whispered through the pines like the last page of a book turning on its own. From within the cabin came the slow creak of the old rocking chair, stirred by a draft, not yet occupied. Not yet. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, Clara took Elias's hand. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For choosing to stand. He looked down at her, face weathered but calm. I didn't stand for you, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I stood for the kind of man I wanted to be again. They sat together as the light faded. Not as fugitives. Not as strangers. But as two souls, scarred and stubborn, daring to hope that maybe, just maybe, the past didn't get the final say. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. And remember, sometimes, the strongest shelter is the heart willing to open its door.